Imagine standing in the middle of nowhere, red dirt stretching to the horizon, the sun beating down at 42 degrees. And right there, in the absolute center of nothing, you find a street. A proper street with buildings on both sides. Except every door is hanging open, every window is shattered, and there is not a single living soul for 200 kilometers in any direction. Australia has more ghost towns than most people realize. While tourists flock to Sydney and the Great Barrier Reef, hundreds of forgotten settlements sit abandoned across the vast outback. Towns that once had populations in the thousands. Post offices, railways, schools full of children, all of it now silent. Some of these places were swallowed by economic collapse when the mines closed. Others were abandoned after a single catastrophic event. A few simply ran out of water, and the residents had no choice but to leave everything behind. But here is what makes these Australian ghost towns different from the romantic ruins you see in American westerns. These places died recently, some within living memory. You can still find newspapers from the 1980s blowing down the main street, rusted cars with their keys still in the ignition, houses with dinner plates still sitting on the kitchen table where families ate their last meal. Today, we are exploring 10 ghost towns hidden across the Australian outback, places where nature is slowly erasing all evidence that humans were ever here. Some of these towns you can visit if you have a four-wheel drive and enough water for the journey. Others are so remote that even Google Maps cannot find them. And one of them has a secret so strange that the Australian government tried to keep it classified for decades. Let's start in Western Australia, in the Eastern Goldfields region, where the unforgiving desert heat turns metal into sculptures and wood into fine dust. Number 1. Gwalia. This town sits 37 kilometres south of Leonora in Western Australia. During the gold rush of 1897, Gwalia exploded from a prospecting camp into a thriving town of 1,200 people. The Sons of Gwalia mine produced over 2 million ounces of gold between 1897 and 1963. The main street had 2 hotels, a post office, and even a tennis court. Herbert Hoover, who would later become President of the United States, worked here as a mine manager in 1898. The town died almost overnight when the mine closed in 1963. What makes Gwalia remarkable today is how well preserved it is. You can walk into the old State Hotel and see the bar exactly as it was left. Bottles still lined up on shelves. The billiard table in the corner with its green felt faded by sunlight. Behind the hotel, weathered wooden houses lean at strange angles, their corrugated iron roofs peeling away like bark from a dead tree. The Sons of Gwalia mine actually reopened in 1984 under new ownership and still operates today. But the old town remains frozen in time, just a few hundred meters from the modern mining operation. You can visit Gwalia on a sealed road, which makes it one of the most accessible ghost towns in this list. The Gwalia Museum preserves Herbert Hoover's original residence and displays mining equipment from the Gold Rush era. Number 2. Cossack. Located in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, Cossack was once the most important port in the northwest. Founded in 1863 as a pearling and pastoral centre, the town grew to over 300 buildings by the 1880s. The stone courthouse, built in 1886, still stands on the hill overlooking Settlers Beach. Japanese pearl divers worked the waters off Cossack, bringing in fortunes in mother of pearl during the height of the pearling boom. But Cossack had a fatal flaw. The harbour was too shallow for the larger ships that began dominating trade in the early 1900s. When the pearling industry collapsed and cyclones destroyed much of the town between 1910 and 1930, residents began moving 20 kilometres south to the deeper port at Point Sampson. By 1950, Cossack was completely abandoned. Today, you can walk through the restored courthouse and post office. The stone buildings have survived the cyclones and the desert heat remarkably well. The old bond store, where pearls were once graded and sold, sits empty with its thick stone walls, keeping the interior cool even in the middle of summer. The cemetery on the hill above town tells stories of the diverse community that lived here. Japanese pearl divers, Chinese merchants, Afghan camel drivers. Their weathered headstones face the Timor Sea, where many of them drowned in the cyclones that regularly battered this coast. Number 3. Farina. This is where things get properly remote. Farina sits on the old Garn railway line in South Australia, roughly 600 kilometres north of Adelaide. The name means flower in Italian, chosen because the town was surrounded by wheat fields when it was established in 1882. At its peak in 1920, Farina had a population of 600 with 2 hotels, a bakery, a bank, an underground bakery to escape the heat, and a camel breeding station. The town died slowly. The wheat farms failed when the soil turned out to be too poor and the water too scarce. The railway was rerouted away from Farina in the 1980s, cutting off the town's only connection to the outside world. The last resident left in 1997. Since then, volunteers have worked to stabilise the ruins and prevent them from disappearing entirely. What makes Farina unique is the underground bakery. Built 8 metres below ground in 1918 to escape the extreme heat, this bakery provided bread to the entire region. You can still climb down into the stone chambers where the ovens once operated. The temperature underground stays around 25 degrees, even when the surface reaches 48 degrees in January. The bakery walls are covered in signatures left by travellers over the past century. Some date back to 1923. Above ground, the stone ruins of the old hotel stand against the red dunes. The walls are still solid after more than a century, but the roof has long since collapsed. Wild camels, descendants of the animals that worked the breeding station, still roam through Farina at night. You can see their tracks in the red dirt around the ruins every morning. Number 4. Silverton. Only 25 kilometres northwest of Broken Hill in New South Wales, Silverton feels like it should be in an American Western film. In fact, it has been used as a location for over 140 films, including Mad Max 2. But Silverton is a real ghost town with a real history, not just a movie set. Silver was discovered here in 1883, and within 2 years, Silverton had a population of 3,000 people. The town had 25 pubs, a newspaper, a school, and a thriving main street. The silver ran out faster than anyone expected. By 1889, most of the population had moved to the richer deposits at Broken Hill. Today, Silverton has a permanent population of about 40 people who mostly make their living from tourism. The Silverton Hotel, built in 1885, still operates as a pub and fills its walls with props from all the films shot in town. The stone courthouse and old jail sit at the end of the main street. Behind the town, the massive mullock heaps from the silver mines form orange and red hills. What makes Silverton genuinely eerie is how many of the original buildings are still standing but completely empty. You can walk down the main street and peer through the windows of shops that closed 70 years ago. It is as if everyone just walked away and never came back. Number 5. Wittenoom. This is the ghost town that the Australian government wants you to forget. Wittenoom sits in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, roughly 1,400 kilometres north of Perth. Between 1937 and 1966, blue asbestos was mined here from the nearby gorges. At its peak, Wittenoom had a population of 20,000 people. The town had shops, a hospital, schools, a cinema, and rows of company housing for the mine workers and their families. The problem was the asbestos. Blue asbestos is the most dangerous form of asbestos, and the mining operations at Wittenoom created massive clouds of blue dust that hung over the town constantly. Workers would come home covered in blue dust. Children played in piles of asbestos tailings that were used to fill the roads and playgrounds. Nobody understood the danger until it was far too late. By the 1970s, former residents and workers began dying from mesothelioma and asbestosis at catastrophic rates. The mine closed in 1966, but the government did not fully evacuate the town until 2007. More than 2,000 people have died from asbestos-related diseases connected to Wittenoom. It remains the worst industrial disaster in Australian history. Today, Wittenoom has been literally erased from official existence. It no longer appears on state maps. Road signs pointing to the town have been removed. The government demolished most of the buildings and buried them in sealed pits. Yet a few structures remains. The old general store, parts of the Colonial Inn Hotel, rows of destroyed houses with only their concrete slabs remaining. And the asbestos is still there. Billions of fibres in the soil and embedded in every surface. The gorges around Wittenoom are spectacularly beautiful, with red rock walls and blue pools of water. But you cannot safely visit them. The entire area is permanently contaminated. The story of Wittenoom is a reminder that not all ghost towns are romantic ruins. Some are graveyards that killed the people who built them. Number 6. Cassilis. Not the Cassilis in New South Wales, but the other one. A tiny settlement in central Queensland that most Australians have never heard of. Cassilis was established in 1861 as a Cobb & Co. coaching station on the route between Claremont and the central Queensland coast. At its peak in the 1880s, the town had a population of about 200 people. A post office opened in 1877 and operated until 1953. If you are finding this fascinating and want more forgotten Australian history every week, hit subscribe right now so you do not miss it. We cover the places and stories that everyone else ignores. Cassilis died when the railway passed it by. The Brisbane to Rockhampton line was built 20 kilometres to the east, and within a decade, Cassilis was abandoned. Today, almost nothing remains. The stone foundations of the old pub sit in a clearing surrounded by eucalyptus trees. The cemetery, about 2 kilometres from the town site, contained 17 marked graves from 1865 to 1943. The last person buried there was a stockman who died when his horse threw him during a muster. What makes Cassilis interesting is how completely it has been reclaimed by the bush. Unlike the desert ghost towns, where buildings can stand for a century, the tropical climate of central Queensland destroys everything. Timber rots in a few decades. Metal rusts through. Within 50 years, an entire town can vanish. The only reason we know Cassilis existed at all is because of the cemetery and a few historical photographs held in the Rockhampton Library. Number 7. Arltunga. This is the oldest ghost town on our list. Arltunga, located 110 kilometres east of Alice Springs in the Northern Territory, was the site of the Northern Territory's first gold rush in 1887. The town grew rapidly to over 300 miners and their families. Water was scarce, temperatures reached 50 degrees in summer, and supplies had to be hauled in by camel train from the south. Despite these hardships, Arltunga persisted for nearly 40 years. The gold ran out by the early 1920s. The last mine closed in 1932, and the remaining families left shortly after. What remains today is one of the best preserved gold rush sites in Central Australia. The stone police station and courthouse, built in 1903, still stand intact. The old battery, where ore was crushed to extract gold, sits rusting among the spinifex grass. Mine shafts tunnel into the red hills around the town, though most are now fenced off for safety. The Arltunga Historical Reserve protects the site today. Rangers conduct regular maintenance to prevent the buildings from collapsing. You can walk through the old government buildings and see where the officials lived who tried to maintain law and order in this desperate outpost. The cemetery holds graves of miners who died from heat stroke, mining accidents, and the occasional murder that broke out when gold fever drove men to violence. What strikes you about Arltunga is the sheer isolation. Even today, with a sealed road connecting it to Alice Springs, the town feels like it is at the edge of the world. You can stand on the main street and see nothing but red desert and distant blue mountains in every direction. The silence is absolute. It is easy to understand why so many miners went mad here. Number 8. Yerranderie. Hidden in the Burragorang Valley, southwest of Sydney, Yerranderie is a ghost town that can only be reached by four-wheel drive on rough mountain tracks. Silver was discovered here in 1880, and by 1900, the town had a population of 1,500. The Yerranderie Private Town Development Company controlled everything: the mine, the houses, the store, even the pub. Workers were paid in company scrip that could only be spent in company-owned businesses. The silver deposits were never as rich as hoped. The mine closed permanently in 1929. The town lingered on with a handful of residents until the 1950s. Today, Yerranderie is owned by the New South Wales government but managed by a private conservation group. About a dozen buildings remain standing. The weathered timber pub, built in 1898, still has bottles on the shelves and newspapers from 1952 on the bar. The old schoolhouse sits on a hill overlooking the town with children's desks still arranged in rows. What makes Yerranderie special is the sense of stepping back in time. Because the valley was flooded for the Warragamba Dam in the 1960s, access to Yerranderie was cut off for decades. The town sat untouched. No looters, no vandals. When conservationists finally reached it in the 2000s, they found the settlement almost perfectly preserved. Light switches on the walls still worked even though the power had been off for 50 years. Letters sat in drawers. Clothes hung in wardrobes. It was as if everyone had simply walked away one day, expecting to return. Number 9. Kuridala. Located in the Mount Isa region of northwest Queensland, Kuridala was established in 1911 when copper was discovered in the surrounding hills. The town grew to a population of 2,000 by 1916. The company built over 100 houses, a school, a hospital, several stores, and a large pub. The Kuridala copper mine operated continuously until 1965, when falling copper prices made the operation unprofitable. The town emptied within months. The company removed everything of value. The machinery was sold. The buildings were stripped of fixtures and fittings. By 1967, Kuridala was a collection of empty shells baking in the Queensland sun. What remains today is fragmentary. Concrete slabs where houses once stood. The stone foundations of the pub. The old mine shaft entrances, now sealed with steel grates to prevent accidents. The smelter chimney still stands 30 metres tall, a red brick monument to the industry that built and killed this town. The most haunting part of Kuridala is the cemetery. 73 marked graves sit on a rocky hill overlooking the old town site. Many are children. Infant mortality was brutally high in remote mining towns where medical care was basic and diseases spread quickly in the crowded company housing. The newest grave dates from 1963, just 2 years before the town was abandoned. It belongs to a miner who died in a roof collapse, one of the last men to work the Kuridala mine. Number 10. Cook. This is the most remote location on our entire list. Cook sits on the Trans-Australian Railway in South Australia, 1,492 kilometres west of Sydney and 547 kilometres east of Perth. The town was established in 1917 as a water and servicing station for the Transcontinental Railway that connected Australia's eastern and western coasts for the first time. During the steam era, Cook was essential. Trains stopped here to take on water and service their locomotives. The town had a population of 40 permanent residents, with additional railway workers rotating through. There was a school, a hospital, a post office, and 2 hotels. When diesel locomotives replaced steam in the 1950s, Cook's purpose evaporated. The population dropped to 10 in the 1970s. The school closed in 1977 when the last child left. Today, Cook has a permanent population of 4 people. They maintain the emergency water and fuel supplies for the Indian Pacific passenger train that passes through twice a week. The old railway cottages sit empty, their weathered timber walls fading to grey. The school building still stands with a rusted swing set in the yard. Inside, children's artwork from 1976 hangs on the walls, yellowed with age. The hospital building is now a museum that opens when the Indian Pacific stops. Passengers get 45 minutes to walk through the ghost town before the train continues its journey across the Nullarbor Plain. What makes Cook so eerie is the absolute nothingness around it. Stand at the end of the platform and look in any direction. You will see flat, treeless desert extending to the horizon. No hills, no landmarks, just red dirt and blue sky. The nearest town, with more than 100 people, is over 400 kilometers away. The railway line is the only human feature visible, running perfectly straight to the east and west until it disappears into the heat shimmer. So what do all these ghost towns tell us about Australia? They reveal a pattern of boom and bust that has repeated across this continent for more than 200 years. Resources are discovered. Towns explode into existence. Fortunes are made. Then the resources run out or become unprofitable, and the towns die as quickly as they were born. The red desert and the bush reclaim what humans tried to build. But these places also tell us something about the people who lived there. The persistence it took to survive in Arltunga when temperatures hit 50 degrees and the nearest doctor was 300 kilometers away. The community spirit that built tennis courts and schools in Gwalia when they could have just taken the gold and left. The tragedy of Wittenoom, where workers and families paid with their lives for an industry that should never have existed. These ghost towns are not just ruins. They are monuments to ambition, greed, endurance, and sometimes catastrophic mistakes. They sit out there in the desert and the bush, slowly disappearing, waiting for the rare travelers who take the rough tracks to find them. Every empty building, every weathered grave marker, every rusted piece of machinery tells a story about who we were and what we were willing to risk for the promise of a better life in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Some of these towns you can visit if you have the equipment and the determination. Others, like Wittenoom, you should never approach. But they all deserve to be remembered, because soon enough, the desert will finish erasing them, and all we will have left are photographs and stories. What do you think? Should these ghost towns be preserved as historical sites, or should nature be allowed to reclaim them completely? Have you visited any abandoned settlements in the Australian Outback? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this journey through Forgotten Australia, hit the like button and subscribe for more explorations of places that time forgot. Thank you for watching. Stay curious. Until next time.